Thanks for doing this with me.
Oh my gosh, you're welcome.
So you guys, this is Kate Baer, 3-time New York Times bestselling author. She wrote What Kind of a Woman? We have I Hope This Finds You Well, and Yet, and your 4th one is coming out soon.
Yeah.
Within like a year.
Yeah.
Very exciting. So we first met November 5th.
I feel like we're on the Drew Barrymore show. You know, this is how close they sit.
Yes!
And they're like,
is this aggressive? Oh,
no,
yeah.
it's fine. It's just like,
Is
good
it
practice.
So it's like a very intimate space.
I like it.
Would it be better if we had like wine and we shot it like later in the day?
Maybe.
If it wasn't
Next
like,
time.
So we met November 5th because Sally and I came to Lancaster, and Sally Christensen and Gina actually did YouTube videos with me in the past.
Oh, wow.
And so Sally had been like talking about this during a YouTube thing, was like, oh, I'm going to go to Lancaster and I'm going to do some canvassing. And I was like, oh my God, I want to come. So we came, you picked us up.
Yeah.
And I knew right away I was going to like you. Do you know why?
Why?
Because you were like blasting some music.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is a gal I can get down with. Because we were like busting some moves in between house to house.
It was a very exciting day.
It was. It didn't last long.
It didn't last long, but it was such a...
But that was fun.
That was fun. Yeah.
That was very fun. So then the next morning, well, I woke up in the middle of the night, you know, wasn't feeling great. November 6th happens. I wake up feeling very sad, and then I see your Instagram post.
Yeah.
From a poem that you had written, My Sister.
Yeah.
And obviously that had you had written that years before. Like that had been written in like 2022. But in that moment, like posting it was everything I needed to hear.
I'm so glad.
Like I read all of the comments and they all seemed to kind of like agree that was the feeling we needed. And I think that day is what made me realize that there is this community that you build of women and men, of people who want to feel something.
Yeah.
Like your work has this ability to poke and prod at feelings that either are so buried in us that we don't even know that they exist or want to know that they exist.
Yeah.
Or they're like right under the surface and you like poke them and like give them life because maybe we didn't know how to talk about them, didn't want to talk about them, whatever. Right. But you just have this way of like throwing a life raft to people and making them feel seen and heard.
That's so nice.
And that's why I feel like you're so popular. What do you think? Like, why do you think you're so popular as a writer?
Oh, that's so nice. I think poetry, there's a lot of people who are kind of under the impression that they aren't smart enough for poetry or that most people, you know, were really done a disservice in school with poetry because we were taught a lot of dead old white guys.
I remember you saying that in an interview. You were like, we learn Robert Frost and Shakespeare.
Which actually Robert Frost and Shakespeare are incredible writers. But there's so much more. And I think when I hear people say I don't like poetry, I think that's very similar to saying I don't like music. It's just if you might not have just heard the right song yet. There's poetry for everyone. There's plenty of people who don't like my poetry, and that's fine, but there would be poetry for them. I'm certain of that. It can just be hard to find sometimes. I think for me, there are a lot of people who kind of use my work as a gateway to poetry because it's accessible and able to be read and understood, especially my demographic, which is like women, especially. And so, my first book came out in the pandemic, which was a really difficult time. It actually came out on election day in the pandemic in 2020. And so there was just a lot going on. And I think it just was a moment where people were looking for comfort and to be seen and to be heard, especially women in caregiving roles. Were looking for some kind of reassurance that they aren't and weren't alone because there were so many people trying to balance having families with having to work from home and homeschool, and there's just a lot going on at that time. So I think that was kind of where that book fit into the world then. And then since then, I don't know. I'm so honored that people are still reading.
Oh my
I
gosh.
hope they keep reading.
Yeah. They will keep reading.
Yeah.
But I think really fast, something that you just said I think is really interesting is that maybe initially that's why your work found footing, like with caregivers.
Yeah.
Right? But like I was saying to you in the car, because Kate picks me up at the train station, it's like I am not a mother or a wife.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. There's something in all of those poems that even if you aren't a mom or aren't a wife, that still resonates.
Well, that's the magic of literature. And when people say, you know, oh, a book about motherhood, that's so niche, it's only for... No. So everybody has a mother, for good or for bad.
Yeah.
How many books were we given as kids that were about baseball or like a coming of age story about a boy? And we could still read that and take something away from it. Because we've all been children. We all came of age. So I can read that and get something from that. Just as people can read what I'm writing about. And even if they aren't a mother, they've still been a child. They've still had a mother. We're still in this world with mothers. And I'm also a person.
Yes.
And like a woman. And so those things are also in there. But I think a lot of times people who write about motherhood get pigeonholed because they're like, oh, well, that's only for other mothers. And that can be tough. It can be tough to sell a book because of that. It can be tough, and not just me, plenty of other people who are writing about motherhood or even just womanhood in general. That can be an obstacle.
The thing, like when I look at your writing, something that I'm most drawn to is the journey that it took to get where you are now, right?
Yeah.
Like you talked about, like in your 20s that you worked odd jobs and then you started blogging during the height of blogging and then you got labeled a mommy blogger. So then you started writing this thriller.
Yeah.
And then you like cheated on
thriller
to
write poetry.
Poetry. Yeah. But it's like every step along the way was so crucial, it seems
absolutely.
like, to get here. Right? Like it was all necessary.
It was all necessary.
So maybe it was like as like fucked up as it is, like that person calling you a mommy blogger like propelled you into this. And then you're like, oh no, that
and
is
I think
like,
a lot of artists have that trajectory. Not those details, but in that way of like stumbling over things until you kind of find your voice or find what you were meant to do the whole time.
Exactly.
Yeah. What finding poetry helped me understand is that I never know what's next. Like I don't know. It kind of opened that door to me of like, oh, I can just keep taking risks. It was more, that's what it showed me. Like, keep taking risks, keep pushing yourself. You might find something else that you love that you can create and work with. I don't know. Does that make sense?
100%.
It kind of like, it's not even that I think, oh, now I'll just be a poet forever. I mean, I think I will be. I have been since I've been 8 years old. Yeah. But it's more like, well, maybe I'll also stumble into something else that brings me life. And I shouldn't shy away from that because I did at first. I'm like, well, I'm not going to be a poet. That's embarrassing. You know?
And here you are.
Here I am. So I think
New York Times bestselling.
That kind of showed me keep taking risks. And I hope that I can keep doing that. Yeah.
Well, you will because that will always be something that's important to you.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so if you're like, right? I think that's... Did you just post something about Cher today saying something along... Did you have an Instagram? I'm like literally having a moment where I'm thinking of Instagram. Did you post a story about Cher today?
I post a lot of stories about Cher, but not today. Actually, Cher, here's a little spoiler for my new book.
Tell me.
Her, in the first pages, Cher is quoted. That's my spoiler. So actually, that we're talking about Cher.
Wait, that's crazy.
I know, because I love Cher, and she gives the perfect quote in her farewell tour for my book, and so I start the book with a quote from Cher. Yeah.
Wait, maybe this is crazy.
But that wasn't me today.
No, that's wild.
Yeah, it is wild. But like actually Cher.
And we just got like a secret like little scoop about your next book. Oh my god, that's thrilling. Okay. Oh wait, there was actually this quote that you said on the Argent website. Okay. Hold on, I want to talk about this really fast. I have this written down because I was like, oh, I love that so much. I've met so many incredible women who are just changing, breaking the mold of the 90s princess whose end of story is getting married to Prince Charming and living behind a white picket fence and being quiet story. That's what I grew up seeing on the screen and what I thought my little 10-year-old self was working towards. I realized there's so much more than that. Seeing women live out that truth of being who they are and not needing a man's validation or a man at all to be themselves has been such a joy. And I say that because I love that energy is just through all of your work.
Yeah, yeah. I don't remember saying that, but I do feel that way.
What if that wasn't actually,
that was absolutely
okay.
me.
Okay.
You know, it kind of took getting married and having kids to realize that, though.
Interesting.
Because once I had that, what I always wanted, because I did always want to get married, I did always want kids, and I still want that.
Yeah.
But then once I had that, I was like, oh, but this isn't enough for me. This isn't enough. I want so much more than that, and that's also okay, and I can have both things.
Yeah.
And also just as you get older, I think you just kind of start to experience the world and realize how many women are in situations that they're not actually happy in. They got their happy ending, what they thought, but then it wasn't at all. And that even when it is happy, even when you do love your partner, when you do love your children, it's there's so much nuance there. It's not a fairy tale romance for me to be married 15 years and be with my husband for 17 years. I don't think of that as a fairy tale. I think of that as like really difficult and like I don't know what's going to happen next. I hope that we can stay together, but it's really hard.
Yeah.
And like life is made up of so much more than that love. There's so much love I have for the women in my life, for all the people that come in and out of my life, the people that I meet from my job. It's like that love is also just as important and also so sustaining to me. So it's not that Austin and my children aren't important, but like, oh, there's also so many other things that are important. But I think we grow up or we see it modeled that there's like a hierarchy.
Yeah.
And that you have to put everything else aside for that to exist and for that to succeed. And that's not true. Yeah.
I think that's why people love you so much and love your work is because you're just honest about it.
Yeah.
I think some people, and we can talk about this later when we get to, I hope this finds you well, where people kind of take issue with that. I think some people don't know how to read that because that's difficult for people to hear. They want to keep believing in this fairy tale because that's what they've like subscribed to their whole life, so they don't want somebody to challenge that.
And if you give up a lot for that and it's not what you want, it's hard to hear that, I think. Yeah.
I like wrote that down because I just feel like that's the energy that's through all of your work is just like the honesty of being like, yes, this is true and I love this part about me, but I'm not going to shy away from the fact that there's like layers and it's nuanced. Yeah. Okay. So actually this segue is perfect. Okay. Moon Song is one of my faves. I have all the pages set up.
Sure.
Okay.
Let me read it in this quiet room.
Oh yeah. No, right? That's why I was like, does this make you feel comfortable?
Because this book came out in the pandemic, so I had to do all my events on Zoom.
Oh, great. Okay.
So I would read it and then I'd be like, and that was it. This is called Moon Song. Okay. You are not an evergreen, unchanged by the pitiless snow. You are not a photo, a brand, a character written for sex or house or show. You do not have to choose one or the other, a dream or a dreamer, the bird or the birder. You may be a woman of commotion and quiet, magic and brain. You can be a mother and a poet, a wife and a lover. You can dance on the graves you dug on Tuesday, pulling out the bones of yourself you began to miss. You can be the sun and the moon, the dance of victory song.
I love that so much. Oh,
that's a favorite of mine too. We're allowed to change and we're allowed to go back. We're allowed to go forward. There's a lot of these rules that are just fake. And there's just so much room for change and so much room for growth. And we're just allowed to change our minds. And I think I lose sight of that. It's also a reminder for myself. Like, I'm allowed to change my mind. I'm allowed to be all sorts of different people. Because we're all made up of all sorts of people. We have so many different versions of ourselves. And,
No, I totally agree with that. I feel like there was another in wedlock. It kind of like makes me think of that same thing. But it's like, is it true you can be one thing then another? Is it true you can be loved anyway? Yeah. Because I do think that we feel, I don't want to say especially as women, but I think that as women we feel pressure to be this one thing. And if we have this other side that might not look as pretty, that you somehow aren't worthy of being loved, right? So you kind of like pretend those parts of you don't exist. Right. But it's like, that ain't real.
That's not real.
We don't want that.
No.
We just want to live our goddamn authentic life.
Exactly.
Okay. I hope this finds you well.
Yeah.
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, am I always erasure poetry, or is it erasure poetry? How do you say
actually, what's more is classified as blackout poetry, but since I did erasure, I call it erasure poetry. People also, another common form is to black it out. I happen just to white it out because I did it online first, and it was easier to see in that way. So this is erasure poetry. Yeah.
Okay, so you received some messages in your DMs, as we do. Not all of them are great, and so you were really clever and used erasure poetry. Okay. All right, so let's get to it. When Chad is a dad, I mean, let's be real, that's just such a good one.
Oh, you want me to read it?
Well, I kind of do, but here's the thing.
No problem.
Do you want me to read Chad's message?
Sure.
Okay, guys, I'm going to be Chad right now. This is an actual message that you got in your DMs.
Yep.
And then she's going to read how she, made it into her own. Okay. I think it's funny how much you hate men and then go ahead and have this husband like he doesn't apply. Not buying your book, but if I was, I would get it for my daughters to show them how not to be. Even though you'll never see this, it's worth sharing not all women think like you or believe men are inherently against women. They might even say they appreciate men. Can't fathom this? Maybe read a book outside your what kind of woman bubble. Sincerely, a man who believes his daughters can be both independent and polite. Okay.
It's funny how men go ahead and have daughters, even though they can't fathom what daughters can be.
What do you think, when you got that? Is there a progression?
To be honest, I thought, thank you for using nouns, because at that point I was like, I get a lot of messages I can't use. Writing this book was really difficult because I had to go through a ton of years worth of blog comments and emails and DMs. And I had to read so much unusable content that was rude or mean or gross, dick pics.
Oh, God.
That didn't have enough content for me to make poetry out of it. I wasn't planning to. I've been doing it with recent stuff kind of as a party trick for Instagram. But then when I was asked to do this book, which I said no to twice, because I was like, that's so depressing to do a whole book of it. And it was, because I had to read so many. I don't sit there and read through all my messages every day. It's a waste of my time.
Yes.
Even though there's so many wonderful ones, I can't do that. Yeah. But I had to for this. And so I had to constantly look for nouns. Yeah. Because you can't really write a poem without nouns. So honestly, my first thought, I don't remember for that one specifically, but I'm sure I was like, oh, I'll screenshot this one. In general, though, when I get those messages, they kind of roll my eyes. I'm like, where are you? Yeah. Are you at work? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, and also,
what was the purpose of this? What are you trying to get out of? Don't follow me.
Well,
or
that's
you know what I mean?
I'm like, if this isn't your content, that's fine.
Move on. That's fine. There's plenty of people on Instagram that I don't engage with their content because it upsets me. Which this is clearly upsetting him. So you can walk away. So that's my honest first thought. Usually I'm like, why did you take the time to write this? I've actually met one of these people. It came to my book event.
Oh my God, stop it.
Yeah, I was in the signing line and the wife went to grab a store employee to take our selfie because there's usually someone there to help with selfies, and she just happened to be around the corner. And it just was a logistical issue that she had to leave us for 20, 30 seconds. Yeah. And he looked at me and he said, thanks for using one of my messages in your book.
Oh my God!
I know. I actually think it's that guy. I don't know for sure, but he kind of had that vibe. But I equate him with that poem. That's why I'm bringing this story up. I don't know if it's him for that particular one, but something that he wrote to me is in this book. I think it's probably that one. So I've actually met him.
Wait, that's insane. Okay.
It's insane. So I had a full body. I actually had that out-of-body experience, because for a second I was like, am I unsafe here?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because for him to say that to me when his wife stepped away.
Yeah.
I do think about her a lot, because, you know, when you kind of get a vibe, I just had like, before he even said that to me, I thought, is she okay? And like, why is she here with her husband? Which sometimes the husbands come, but usually it's like girlfriends that come to my events or like stand in line. But they had like a very weird energy. And so I think about her a lot. I hope she's okay. They have, I happen to know they have a bunch of daughters. Anyway, so it's actually very sad. It's actually very, that poem's very sad to me, because I think that's who that was. And even if it wasn't, he still sent me a message in there. It's really sad.
You don't think that the wife knew then?
No, absolutely not.
I mean, that also feels odd and weird, right?
Also odd and weird.
Like,
yeah. Well, that's probably why he messaged me, though, because I'm going to guess his wife reads my books and like maybe posted something. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I was gonna say, how would he have it? Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Because that actually makes more sense. Because what we were talking about before. Why would a man follow me and message me? I think there's like a trigger point of someone that they know. You know, that's my guess. Yeah, I'm just thinking logistically. That's kind of a sad take, but in my experience, just anecdotally, I just know a lot of women who have gotten to a point in their life where they're like, I actually don't think my partner respects women.
So when I think of a man who's writing those messages, I'm like, there's some kind of anger.
Yeah, or right? Insecurity.
Yeah. But I'm like,
or fear.
Anger isn't like necessarily, like, it's not a bad thing, right? Like, I'm angry about women's rights being taken away from us. Like, when we typically feel anger when we feel like we've been wronged, or there's an injustice.
Or we're threatened. And I think there's the threat.
And so that's what I'm wondering. It's like, where does that come from, and why are you threatened? Another one, the male ego. Okay. I'm going to read this, and then you can read.
It's very brief, yeah.
That's best. Okay. It's called The Male Ego. So somebody writes, recently I read your piece about being surprised men have been able to have power as long as they have. And I find this to be a hilarious take, as it is supremely biology. Like, what in the actual hell are you talking about? The reason men have been in leadership roles this long is because 1, it works, 2, it was meant to be this way, and 3, women want a male leader. It literally benefits them for men to be in the protector role. Think about every war and famine and natural disaster. Men fight, make change on behalf of the women. It's honest to God the basic human playbook.
Yeah, what I made from this is very brief, and it just reads, read a book.
I literally laughed out loud. I was like, that's so genius. There's really nothing else to say.
Yeah, there's nothing else to say.
Perfect. Okay, so the other one I want to talk about is the one called facial sagging.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because just of like our society's relationship to beauty, and specifically when it comes to women. So I don't like need to read this whole thing, but basically you just received a message from an anti-aging company.
I get messages like this a lot. I think a lot of influencers, or like just people who have people on the internet, are getting like, this actually was an email. The poem's called Your Facial Sagging. And here it is. How the dead must cringe at our resistance to look as if we've lived.
I love that so much. I love it, because I think that in the industry that I'm in, and just listen, you don't have to be in any industry, like, we're all affected by this as like women in our culture and society, but like this pressure to look as if we haven't aged, and to like look like we're youthful and young forever. When we are dead and no longer on this planet, we will look back and be like, what a waste of goddamn time.
When I wrote that poem, I really thought a lot about my my cousin Alicia died when she was 21, and I think about her a lot whenever people are talking about like their birthday coming up, and I'm just as guilty of this. Of course, we all it's not that it's not normal to feel these things, but I think about her a lot when people talk about how they don't want their birthday to come up, or they're talking about, very parts of their body that are looking aged. And I'm like, it's such a privilege. She would love to still be here. We would all love her to be here. Yeah. She didn't get that. She didn't get to do that. And so I just think about her. I actually think about her a lot on my birthday when I'm starting to feel that, like, because I'm about to turn 40. It's just such a privilege to still be here. Yeah. 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 So I thought about her a lot when I wrote that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I like the acknowledgement that these are things that we all struggle with.
Sure.
Because it's just a reminder of our mortality. But like you're saying, it's like, how privileged are we to be alive in this moment? Some actor recently was like, listen, I'm getting older and I'm more wise, but I'm in an uglier, like, bad, like I'm starting to look like a paper bag or something, and kind of dismissing her appearance. And I was like, oh, that's kind of sad. And then I heard Kate Winslet be like, I feel more beautiful because of my wisdom and my experience, and I like that it shows on my face. Yeah. And I'm like, that's actually the energy that I want to subscribe to. Absolutely. More so than being like, yeah, maybe my package won't look as nice.
And it's kind of crazy how much we have so much power over our own thinking, even if you fake it at first. Mm-hmm. There's so much power to, even if you're lying, to saying out loud to yourself or to others, I like how I look. I love that I'm aging. Even if you don't believe it, if you say that enough, you kind of do start to believe it. You're like, wait, I am proud of what I look like. I am proud of myself, because you kind of talk yourself into it the more you say it. Yes. It's because the reverse is obviously very true. If you're constantly belittling your body, it just becomes that groove in your mind that gets worn over and over, so that your thought pattern keeps going on that same groove. But if you make a new one, even if you're kind of lying at first, you're carving out the chance for your thoughts to go that way. Totally. And then it just becomes true. Not that that's not hard. I'm not saying it's as easy as that, but it also kind of is. It takes work to do that, but then it is possible.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to And Yet, because this is the one that I read. Well, I mean, I'd read it before, but that I was reminded of on November 6th. Okay, For My Sister, and then I promise you only like one more.
Oh my goodness, I'm fine. I'm happy to sit here with you all afternoon. This one's called For My Sister. It looks hopeless because the hope was sucked out of the room. Kind of a good news, bad news situation. The good news is there's a door. The bad news is that it's difficult to open. Do you remember when we were kids, running down the hill, not knowing if our legs could carry us? That is how you must continue. Wildly, wildly, unafraid of what will surely come.
That's like now gonna always have like the emotional response of like how I felt the day after the election. Like it feels so well suited for the election. Yeah. I'm like, surely you wrote that about the election, but obviously you didn't.
I didn't. No, I actually wrote that for my sister who had been going through a really difficult time in her personal life, and she has that framed by her computer now. So yeah, it was a very personal poem, but I think it does kind of have a universal look at how life is going to be. We're going to have difficult times, whether we want it to or not. Mm-hmm. There's just so many valleys and that are going to come our way, and there's really no way but through. And so that's where that came from. But it felt like the appropriate thing to post. Yeah.
It really does. Yeah. Well, because it's like for the universal sister, but then I'm like, oh, of course, yeah, you probably
I literally do. I literally like have actual a sister. I'm like, oh. My sister, yes. I have one sister, and I did write that for her. Yeah.
That's very sweet. I feel like there's literally a poem for every emotion if you...
So glad.
It really is. But, I mean, we need more still, so keep writing. But, oh my God, and then There Are Days. Oh. This is actually one of my favorite.
It's one of my favorites, too.
Like, so one of my absolute favorites.
Yeah, I wrote this poem in the last Trump presidency, if that gives some context. Yeah. This is called There Are Days. There are days I can't believe we let the boys with the new blue jeans and the slick haircuts decide the emotions of fourth grade girls. And how those boys grow into fall athletes and spring play leads, all arms around our waists and can I call you baby now that we are thin. And how they follow us to college, haunt our rooms with little deaths. How they slip behind a desk to sign our paychecks, become somebody's husband, say, now that I have a daughter. How they climb and climb and climb and climb. Yeah. And honestly, that poem makes me sad.
It makes me so
because
sad.
I haven't written that recently, but when I read it, it feels just as recent. It doesn't really feel from the past. It just feels like I could have written that yesterday. But yeah.
Because I think that is just like still the world that we live in, you know?
Right, yeah.
Like you think about, I don't know. It's just like when I think about that poem, it just like really takes me back to being like that little kid and thinking about how much of our energy in life has been devoted to getting the attention of or and
the
then
male gaze. It's crazy. It's like how much time was wasted. So much time.
So much time.
And you like think about the people that we wasted our time over.
Oh,
and
Jesus.
It's like it's really embarrassing. I have a daughter now who's in 5th grade, so we're getting close to that. And it's like, how do I show her what a waste of time it is? It's like, it's just so hard because I can see now from my vantage point what a waste of time it is. But have we changed enough for her to be able to see that? I don't know.
We are all susceptible to it because there is like some point in our life where I think we're going to come up against it where, you just give this person or this thing more attention than they deserve. Because there's still a part of us as girls who have always been taught to like be wanted or something because that's where our worth comes from.
Right. I had this like kind of crazy conversation with Austin yesterday. I actually keep thinking about it. He probably hasn't thought about it again. But
we love that. That happens to me all the time.
We were sitting in the living room. We've had a really crazy week, so we haven't really been catching up. Haven't really talked. And he was telling me that he had like watched half of this movie called Dune 2. I've never seen Dune. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when there's like violent movies, I like want to know the plot points because I'm like into stories, but I'm like never going to watch that. So I was like making him tell me the plot. This is I promise this story has a point.
Yeah.
Basically, I was making my husband tell me the plot of Dune 1 and Dune 2.
Correct.
Okay? I've never read the books. I'm never going to watch the movies. And he was telling me it's about like humans living on other planets, inhabiting other planets very far into the future. It was a book written in the 60s that is... Anyway.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like, tell me about like how they run these planets. And he's like, well, there's this one tribe or like people where the men and women are equal. And I kind of paused at that. And I'm like, oh, so you mean not like us? And he was like quiet for a second. He was like, no, not like us. And then it was such I know this, maybe this story sounds crazy. Just cut it out.
No.
But I kind of like, I like took a second and was like, isn't it crazy that the two of us are just like saying that? Even though they do different things than the men, they're all treated the same. They have equal power. But it was like so for him to say we don't have equal power and him just to say that, I'm like, you realize how crazy that sounds. Yeah, like in 2024 that you're like distinguishing that kind of scenario is different than what we have now in like such a casual way.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't being like,
no, of course.
You know, like,
of course.
Like us, haha, look at you. But he was just kind of like, right, not like us. Like, well, that's fucking sucks.
That does fucking suck. And it's only, I feel like we're only going backwards.
We're backsliding
a lot.
Yeah, I know.
A lot.
I hope
remember
not a lot. Like, I know.
But I remember waking up after that election and saying, I was like, I never want to hear that we live in a country where women and men are equal ever again.
No, because we're not.
What is this in? Harvest Moon.
That is from the new book. Yeah, so you would have seen it there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we do this one? Because I love this. And like, I feel like this is a good way to end it.
I would love to. Oh, I haven't read this. I haven't read anything from the new book.
Is it okay to read it?
Yes, of course. Oh my gosh.
Because I was like, wait a second. I know that this is on your Instagram.
Yeah, I shared a preview of the new book from the Instagram on Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, this is from the new book. The title I cannot divulge at the moment, but the title and the cover and pre-orders will be available in early next year.
Yeah, very exciting. Okay,
but this poem is from that book, and it's one of my favorites. I think it's the second poem in the book. So it starts off the collection, and it's one of my favorites. This is called Harvest Moon. You text your friends, "Have you seen the moon?" They say they have, but you don't believe them. They are tucked into their beds watching Jeremy Allen White on the television. "Have you seen the moon?" you ask your husband. It's like he doesn't hear you. So you parade around the room, spray-tanned and irreplaceable. No one ever listens because you're always talking. Write this down, a note to self. If God had wanted sheep, she wouldn't have made us full of longing. Thank you for having me read that. I haven't read that out loud. I haven't recorded the audiobook, so I've only muttered that in my office to myself. So,
I love it so much. I just love reading those last three little lines. Yeah. Just because God is a woman is a nice thought, right?
Yes.
And just she wouldn't have made us full of longing. Oh my God, I love it. I feel like
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for printing that out and having me read that. That was so nice.
I just realized that other quick questions, and I will just speed through it.
What time is it? We have plenty of time.
Okay. I just wanted to ask random little questions just about the process of writing. So I see these poems, and I'm just what percentage of time is thinking versus writing? I'm do you think about these for days and then it just blurts out of you, or is it thought line, how does it happen?
That's a great question. So I have set office hours, because if you sit and wait for inspiration to write, you'll never write anything. So there are days where I sit in my office in my chair in front of a blank screen and I don't write anything, but I force myself to sit there and try. As far as what I'm writing about, I'm constantly emailing myself, because there's so many times a word or a sentence or an idea comes to me, but I can't do it right in that particular moment. So I actually just email my work email address. And so often when I first sit down, I'm looking through all these emails that I'm what did I even, what was I talking? There's so many times where I don't even know what I was talking about, but a lot of that imagery is just from real life. There's not one clear way that I'm writing, because there are some poems that I will write in about 10 minutes that it's it just comes to me. It's almost like it's already been written, and I sit down and I just write it, and then I'm oh, there it is. Those are my favorite, obviously. That's kind of the exception. Most of them are just hard fought.
Interesting.
And take a long time, and some of them I've been trying to write for 6 or 7 years, and I'll come back to it and I'm it's still not right. And then some of them just happen, and so it really is a mix. It's a real mix of how they come to be.
And do you just have a folder on your computer with all of them? That you just even the ones that you're thinking about from 7 years ago?
Oh yeah, I have a poetry grave. I have folder. I have a poetry hospital. I have the I have
is that what they're called?
Yeah, I have a folder that's just new poems, which is individual. I write on Google Docs, and so there's all of those. And then now I have a manuscript that I add them into. I have I probably have 20 cut poems from this last book that I probably never use them, because I get to a certain point. I know.
Maybe it's kind of you know what's so interesting about this? One of my favorite art exhibits, this is going to sound random, but I promise there's a point, at the Met Brewer. I never know how to say it. It was one of their shows called Unfinished, and it was the best show I've literally ever seen in my life, because you saw all of these incredible artists Klimt's that were up there, but it was the underpainting, which I actually find so much more beautiful sometimes than the finished painting.
Yeah.
So maybe there's an unfinished, maybe there's a seed of an idea, but
I love that. Oh my gosh, some of them are so weird. Yeah.
But then it's take this weird thing that I wrote and don't really know where it was
that
gonna
my
go.
editor was what the hell?
Yeah. And let other people use it, dissect it.
I very rarely delete. So maybe when I'm dead, someone will go through my stuff and be here's all the stuff that she cut out. There's so much that gets cut.
Thank you for doing this.
This was so fun.
Thank you. I'm like, I just
Do you
feel
want
like
any more? I'm fine. Like, you don't need to worry about me. I'm good.